What happens when a powerful billionaire's world is shaken by a mysterious, obsessive stalker targeting his wife? How far would a man go to protect the woman he loves from a dark, twisted obsession that haunts her past? Will he be able to unravel the secret she's kept hidden for so long? Or will the shadows of her history destroy everything they've built together? As the danger closes in, can Alexander Gray's control and determination save Charlotte from the grip of someone who believes she belongs to them? And when the truth finally comes to light, will their love survive? If you're hooked by this story, hit like and subscribe now. Stay tuned for more twists, suspense, and heart-pounding moments. Don't miss out on the next twist. Subscribe and join us for the journey. The night had settled over the mansion like a gentle lullaby. From the grand chandeliers above to the deep plush carpet beneath their feet, everything exuded wealth and comfort. Alexander Gray, a man accustomed to control, stood by the tall windows of his bedroom, looking out over the sprawling estate. He had built an empire from nothing. His company, his name, everything carefully curated, planned, and perfect. Now in his arms was Charlotte, his beautiful newlywed wife, the woman he had promised to protect, to cherish, to keep from harm. Their wedding had been everything he'd imagined, extravagant, elegant, and yet somehow, even in the midst of it all, there had been an undercurrent of something deeper between them, a connection he hadn't fully anticipated, one that made him want to be more than just a man of control. But tonight, everything felt like it had finally come together. Charlotte, radiant and serene, lay beside him, her head resting on his chest. They shared a moment of silence, only the soft hum of the evening breeze rustling through the windows as their background. "I still can't believe we're finally here," she whispered, her voice warm and filled with contentment. Alexander stroked her hair, his mind momentarily free from his usual need to strategize every detail. "Neither can I. But now that we are, nothing will break this." His words were reassuring, a promise, but deep down, Alexander knew he wasn't just speaking about their marriage. He was speaking of the life he had carefully constructed, and Charlotte was the final, delicate piece in his meticulously ordered world. As the minutes passed, the calm of the night embraced them both. But Alexander, despite his outward serenity, felt an unease, one he couldn't quite shake. He had always been a man of vigilance, of calculated attention, and tonight something didn't feel quite right. Charlotte kissed him softly on the cheek, then nestled deeper into the warmth of the blankets. With a deep, contented sigh, she closed her eyes, and Alexander watched her for a moment. He hadn't fully let go of the tension in his mind, but his body began to relax, and he allowed himself to slip into a light sleep. But it wasn't long before something disrupted the stillness. A soft knock echoed through the quiet room. It was faint, but distinct enough to stir Alexander's senses. His eyes flickered open, and he could hear the low hum of the doorbell from across the mansion. But Charlotte remained asleep beside him, her breathing slow and steady. He feigned sleep, his senses heightened, waiting to see what would unfold next. Soon, the door creaked open. The sound was faint, but Alexander could hear the delicate click of heels as Charlotte rose from their bed, moving toward the door. His eyes barely cracked open, just enough to watch her silhouette through the corner of his eye. Charlotte opened the door, her figure briefly illuminated by the hallway light. A man in a plain delivery uniform stood at the threshold, holding a small package wrapped in pristine white paper, tied with a red ribbon. Alexander's heart skipped a beat, sensing the oddness of the moment. Who would send a gift at this hour? Charlotte's voice was soft but slightly tremulous. "A gift?" The delivery man nodded, his face impassive. "For Mrs. Gray," he said, handing over the package. The moment stretched on for a few seconds before Charlotte took it, her fingers slightly trembling. Alexander could hear the exchange, and he knew something was off. Charlotte quickly closed the door behind her, walking briskly back to the bed with the gift in hand. She set the package down on the side table with a quiet breath, trying her best to seem unfazed, but Alexander noticed. There was something in the way she handled the package, the way her hands lingered on it for just a moment too long, as though she were unsure of what to do next. With a faint sigh, Charlotte sat back down beside him. "It's nothing," she said quickly, trying to sound casual, but Alexander could hear the subtle edge of nervousness in her voice. His eyes, now fully open, met hers. "A gift at this hour? From who?" His voice was calm, but his gaze was sharp, studying her every move. Charlotte paused, her eyes flickering to the package before she forced a smile. "It's just a fan, I suppose. Someone from the wedding, maybe." Alexander's mind immediately went to work analyzing the situation. This didn't feel right. A late-night delivery? The oddness of it all couldn't be dismissed so easily. He tried to push the thoughts aside, but they lingered. Who would send something at this hour? And more importantly, why was Charlotte so nervous? She quickly grabbed the package and tucked it behind a stack of books on the side table, as though hiding it away. "It's really nothing," she said, turning back toward him, trying to shift the mood. But the tension in the room only grew. Alexander, always a man of control, had never been this unsure of something in his life. His instincts were telling him something was off. But Charlotte's attempts to brush it off made him question if she was hiding something from him. The unanswered question burned at the back of his mind. Who is sending these gifts, and why? And as the night drew on, the mystery deepened, leaving the billionaire unable to shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far more dangerous than he could have imagined. The sun was still low on the horizon, casting soft rays of morning light into the room as Alexander slowly awoke. The quiet peace of the mansion, which had seemed so comforting the night before, now felt strangely heavy. His mind immediately drifted back to the events of last night, the mysterious gift, Charlotte's nervousness, and the way she had quickly hidden it away. Beside him, Charlotte was still asleep, her face peaceful, but there was a tension in the way her body was positioned. She was curled up beneath the covers, almost as if she were trying to shield herself from something unseen. Alexander lay there for a moment, silently watching her. He wanted to trust her. He wanted to believe it was nothing, but the unease gnawing at him refused to let go. He sat up slowly, the silk sheets sliding off his body as he moved. He was a man of action, a man who always sought control. And right now, control meant understanding what was happening. Charlotte stirred as he slid out of bed, blinking sleepily. Her eyes flickered to him and then, almost instinctively, to the side table where she had hidden the package. Alexander followed her gaze, and his suspicions immediately deepened. He stood up, pacing toward the table. "Charlotte," he began softly, his voice steady but firm, "we need to talk about last night." She sat up quickly, a look of panic flashing in her eyes, but she masked it almost instantly. "What about last night?" she asked, her voice far too calm given the circumstances. "The gift," he said, turning to face her. "Who sent it? And why didn't you tell me about it right away?" Charlotte's expression faltered for just a moment, and in that brief second Alexander saw the flicker of something, fear, anxiety, cross her face. But she quickly composed herself, offering him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's really nothing, Alexander. I told you," she said, her tone light but forced. "Probably just someone from the wedding. A gift from a well-wisher." Alexander crossed his arms, studying her closely. He wasn't convinced. He had seen that look before, the one that women often wore when they were trying to hide something. "I know you're trying to protect me from whatever this is, but I can't ignore it. Not anymore." Charlotte hesitated, her eyes darting to the side as though she was weighing whether or not to continue. Finally, with a sigh, she relented. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She got up from the bed, slowly walking toward the side table. She hesitated again before picking up the gift and carefully unwrapping it in front of him. Inside, nestled in a velvet-lined box, was an ornate necklace. It shimmered in the morning light, a flawless diamond pendant, set in a gold chain so delicate that it seemed to glow on its own. The necklace was stunning, beautiful, and far too expensive for a simple gift. Alexander's eyes narrowed as he reached out to take it from her hands, the cold weight of it feeling far too heavy for just a well-wisher's token. Charlotte watched him carefully, but there was no hiding the nervousness that had crept into her posture. She fidgeted with the hem of her nightgown, avoiding his gaze. "It's just a gift, Alexander. Someone sent it to me. I don't know who. Maybe Maybe one of your colleagues or someone we don't know well enough. Alexander's suspicion grew. Someone who knows you well enough to send you something like this, he murmured, examining the necklace closely. The intricate craftsmanship, the quality of the diamonds. It was not the type of gift someone would send without a reason. His mind raced with possibilities. Who could send something like this to his wife? It wasn't just the gift itself, it was the timing. Why would it come at such a strange hour? And why had Charlotte been so evasive? You didn't tell me about this gift when it arrived, Alexander pressed, turning to face her fully. Why hide it, Charlotte? Her eyes widened, her lips parting as if to speak, but she closed them again, looking away. Her silence spoke volumes. I'm not angry, Alexander said softly, but there was a firmness in his voice now. I just need to know. This isn't a small thing. Not with everything we've built. We're in this together. Charlotte finally met his gaze, and for the first time, Alexander saw the vulnerability in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words faltered. She hesitated for a long moment before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know why, Alexander. I don't know who sent it or why. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to think I was involved in something shady. But I promise you I'm not hiding anything from you. I swear. The sincerity in her voice made Alexander pause, but his gut told him there was more to the story. The fear in her eyes told him that she didn't have all the answers. I'm going to find out who sent this, he said quietly. I'll get to the bottom of it. You don't have to worry anymore, Charlotte. But we need to figure this out together. She nodded slowly, a small relieved smile crossing her face. Thank you. I don't want you to feel like I'm keeping secrets from you. But as she spoke, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far more complicated. Someone was watching them, and whoever it was had a plan. Alexander's suspicion only deepens and his determination to uncover the truth grows. As Charlotte continues to deflect, the mystery surrounding the gifts deepens. Alexander is more resolved than ever to protect her, but the question lingers. Who is behind this and why are they targeting Charlotte? The morning light was creeping through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room, but inside an oppressive silence filled the air. Alexander sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the ornate necklace in his hands, his thoughts racing. Charlotte had remained eerily quiet, her hands folded in her lap, avoiding his gaze. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, and Alexander's patience, usually endless, was starting to wear thin. He turned the necklace over in his hands, his mind still working on the puzzle. Each cryptic gesture, the delivery of the gifts at night, Charlotte's hesitation, none of it made sense. There had to be more. There was something Charlotte wasn't telling him, and for the first time since their marriage began, Alexander felt a sense of betrayal. Charlotte, he began softly, but firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You're not telling me everything. I need you to be honest with me. This is important. Charlotte's shoulders sagged under the weight of his words. She hadn't expected him to press her so soon, but the look in his eyes, the determination, was impossible to ignore. She sighed deeply, closing her eyes as if to brace herself. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been receiving gifts from the same person for the past month. The words landed like a stone in the pit of Alexander's stomach. He felt his chest tighten as he processed her admission. Gifts? He repeated, his mind spinning. Why didn't you tell me? Why keep this from me? Charlotte finally looked up at him, her eyes filled with raw fear. The kind of fear Alexander had never seen in her before. I didn't want to worry you. I thought maybe it was harmless at first. Just a gesture, you know. Her voice trembled. But then the gifts started coming more frequently, every week without fail. And each one had a note. Alexander's grip on the necklace tightened. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. What kind of notes? He asked, his voice sharp. Charlotte swallowed hard. They were cryptic. Unsettling. At first it was just general things. You're beautiful, and I'm thinking of you. But then the messages became more specific. They knew things about me, about us. Things only someone who had been watching me would know. She paused, her breath shaky. I started to feel like I was being followed. I don't know how, but I could feel someone always nearby. It's been getting worse, Alexander. The room seemed to close in around them as Charlotte's confession sank in. The thought of someone following her, sending her these gifts, was enough to rattle anyone. But the fact that Charlotte had been carrying this fear alone, shielding him from it, made Alexander's blood boil. Why didn't you come to me sooner? His voice was tight with frustration and worry. He had always prided himself on being able to protect those he loved, but Charlotte had kept him in the dark. The sense of betrayal, though unintentional, stung. Charlotte lowered her head, her eyes flickering with guilt. I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to burden you. I didn't want you to think I was being dramatic or overreacting. But now it's more than just gifts. It feels like someone is out there watching me, and I don't know who it is or why they're doing this. Alexander stood up suddenly, his thoughts racing. He was furious, not at Charlotte, but at the unknown person who had put her in this situation. The man who had been sending these gifts, the one who had been watching her every move. His instincts screamed that this wasn't some random admirer. This was something darker, more sinister. I'll find out who's behind this, Alexander said, his voice cold with determination. I won't let anyone threaten you like this. I'll make sure this person never comes near you again. Charlotte looked up at him, her eyes filled with relief, though there was still a tremor in her voice. You'll find them? She asked, almost in disbelief. You'll protect me? Alexander walked toward her, kneeling down beside the bed and taking her hands in his. His eyes softened, but the edge of anger remained. I'll do whatever it takes. This ends now. Charlotte squeezed his hands, her voice barely a whisper. I don't want to be afraid anymore, Alexander. I don't want to feel like I'm being hunted. You won't have to, he promised, his voice unwavering. I'm going to find out who this is, and when I do, they won't be able to hurt you anymore. As Alexander makes his vow to protect Charlotte, the seriousness of the situation becomes all too clear. The mystery deepens, and now the focus shifts to uncovering the identity of the person behind the gifts. Who is this person? What do they want with Charlotte? And why is she being targeted? Alexander's investigation will reveal darker truths, and the danger is far from over. The atmosphere in the mansion had shifted. The air, once light and peaceful, now felt thick with tension and an undercurrent of dread. Charlotte's confession had left Alexander reeling, but he was no longer content to sit idly by. This was no longer just about a mysterious admirer. It was about protecting the woman he loved, the woman who had been unknowingly tormented by someone from her past. He paced across the expansive office, his mind racing. The man who had been sending the gifts was not a random stranger. Alexander's instincts told him that. This person knew too much about Charlotte, too much about their life, and that knowledge was dangerous. He turned to his trusted assistant, Elena, who had worked for him for years and knew how to get things done. Get me everything you can on the deliveries, he said, his voice cold with fury. I want to know where they're coming from, who's behind them. This ends now. Elena nodded without hesitation, her fingers already flying over her tablet as she set about gathering data. I'll tap into our network, find the delivery patterns, and cross-reference with any possible surveillance footage from the areas where the deliveries were made. Alexander turned away, his jaw clenched in frustration. Every minute that passed was another minute Charlotte spent in fear. He couldn't wait for things to unfold passively. He needed answers now. The sprawling network of private investigators, intelligence officers, and surveillance systems he had at his disposal were already being mobilized. As the day wore on, the details started to surface. By nightfall, Alexander had a clearer picture of the situation. Eleanor had found the origins of the mysterious deliveries. The packages were all coming from different addresses, but each sender was linked to a series of mysterious anonymous accounts. None of the names on the deliveries were real. It was as if the person behind this had gone to great lengths to obscure their identity, but the deeper they dug, the more unsettling the findings became. Alexander's network of intelligence officers began tracing the delivery routes, using their access to local surveillance footage. That's when they uncovered the first piece of the puzzle, The deliveries were always made in the middle of the night, late enough to avoid notice, but consistent enough to form a pattern. And the most chilling detail? Every delivery coincided with Charlotte's schedule. Whoever this person was, they had been watching her closely, learning her habits, tracking her every move. The stalker's been following her for weeks, maybe longer, Eleanor reported, her voice tight with concern. There's footage of someone leaving a package in her driveway. And then, always disappearing into the shadows. This isn't just random, they've been planning this. Alexander slammed his fist against the desk, a dark rage building within him. How dare someone threaten his wife? How dare someone encroach upon their life in such a vile way? As the investigation deepened, more disturbing details emerged. The gifts were not mere tokens of affection or admiration. They were carefully curated pieces, expensive, intimate, and loaded with meaning. The first gift, the necklace, was the most telling. It was a symbol of something more than admiration. It was a sign of possession, of obsession. The notes, which had started out cryptic but innocent, became increasingly specific. They mentioned private moments in Charlotte's life, places she had visited, conversations she'd had with Alexander. These weren't the notes of a secret admirer. They were the notes of someone who had been watching her for months, learning her every detail. And every gift was a calculated message, each one revealing more about the stalker's disturbing fixation. Alexander's fury turned to something darker, an unrelenting need for justice. He needed to find this person, and he would stop at nothing to ensure Charlotte was safe. "Whoever this is, they know too much," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is more than just a random stalker. This person wants something. They want control over her, and I won't let that happen." With each new revelation, the stakes grew higher. Alexander's investigation revealed just how far the stalker was willing to go to control Charlotte. The thought that someone had been following her for so long, someone who had been invading their lives without them knowing, made Alexander's blood run cold. Every lead they followed only seemed to confirm one thing. This stalker was not going to stop until they had what they wanted. The question was, what did they want? And how far would they go to get it? As the days passed and the investigation deepened, Alexander's focus never wavered. The mystery of the gifts was unraveling, but each answer only raised more questions. Would Alexander be able to protect Charlotte in time? And how far was he willing to go to make sure the person behind this was stopped? The tension was palpable, and the clock was ticking. The true depth of the threat was finally beginning to come into focus, and Alexander knew that their lives were about to change forever. The tension in the air was unbearable as Alexander stepped into the dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The place was eerily quiet, the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead the only sound. He could feel the weight of every step he took, the force of his anger building with each passing moment. His hand gripped the cold metal of the gun tucked beneath his jacket, but it wasn't violence he sought. It was answers. Answers that had been hiding in the shadows, in the darkest corners of Charlotte's past. Behind him, his team was spread out, securing the area, ensuring that the stalker wouldn't escape. They had tracked the source of the gifts here. This abandoned building, the place where everything had come to a head. Alexander's mind raced. He had been hunting this man for days, digging through every lead, every piece of evidence. Now the final confrontation was here. He couldn't afford to fail, not with Charlotte's life at stake. The door creaked open and a shadow moved within. Alexander's heart skipped a beat as the figure emerged from the darkness. It was him, the stalker, Elias Crawford, a name Alexander had only just learned, but one that would soon be burned into his memory forever. Elias was taller than Alexander had expected, with unkempt hair and a haunted look in his eyes, as though he had been consumed by something far more sinister. His expression was cold, calculating, just like the way he had manipulated the entire situation, staying in the shadows, watching Charlotte, and planting the seeds of his obsession. "Mr. Gray," Elias said, his voice low, almost mocking, I didn't expect you to be the one to come after me. I thought you'd send someone else. But then again, you seem to care more than I thought. Alexander's grip on the gun tightened, his anger flaring. He stepped closer, his voice laced with fury. You've terrorized my wife long enough. I'm going to make sure you never hurt her again. Elias laughed, a dry, hollow sound that echoed off the walls. Hurt her? No, Mr. Gray, I've done nothing but show her the love she deserves. At those words, Alexander froze. Love. The word seemed so foreign coming from Elias, whose eyes glinted with a twisted hunger. This wasn't love, this was an obsession. I don't know what you think you're doing. But it ends now, Alexander growled, stepping forward, his chest tight with the need to protect Charlotte. But Elias just smirked, his eyes flashing with a dangerous, knowing look. You don't understand, do you? He said, his tone almost wistful. Charlotte was mine long before you came along. She promised me. She said she loved me. The confession hit Alexander like a punch to the gut. His mind raced as he tried to process what Elias had just said. What had Charlotte been hiding? What was the connection between them? Charlotte never told me about you, Alexander said, his voice more controlled now, but the anger still simmered beneath the surface. She didn't mention the promises you claim she made. Elias's face twisted into something darker, more desperate. Of course she didn't. She didn't want you to know, but I was the one who was there for her when she needed someone. I was the one who saved her. She left me for you, Alexander. And that's something I can't let go. The truth began to unravel before Alexander's eyes. It wasn't just a random stalker. Elias wasn't some stranger who had simply become obsessed with Charlotte. No, this was a man whose love for her had become a twisted, possessive obsession. He had been part of Charlotte's life long before Alexander, and from the way Elias spoke, it was clear that he had never let go. Charlotte had never mentioned Elias, not once in the time they had been together, and now Alexander understood why. What Elias didn't know, however, was that Charlotte had been running from him for years. She had tried to bury the past, tried to forget the toxic, controlling love that Elias had forced upon her. Charlotte doesn't want you, Alexander said, his voice steady, despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. She chose me, and that's not something you can take away. You don't get to control her anymore. Elias's eyes hardened, the pain in them shifting into rage. You don't understand, he hissed. She was never yours to keep. You'll never be able to protect her from me. She belongs with me. She always has? The room fell silent, the weight of Elias's words hanging in the air. Alexander felt the intensity of the moment, the terrible knowledge that he was standing face to face with someone who had twisted love into something dark and monstrous. He wasn't just facing a stalker. He was facing a man who had been consumed by his own sense of entitlement to Charlotte, someone who believed she was his, no matter what she wanted. But there was one thing Elias didn't understand. Charlotte was not his. The confrontation was nearing its breaking point. Alexander's heart was racing, but his mind remained sharp. Elias's twisted obsession had pushed him to the edge, and now it was up to Alexander to end it once and for all. As the final pieces of Charlotte's painful past fell into place, the stakes had never been higher. Could Alexander protect her from the dangerous grip Elias still had on her? Would he be able to free her from the past that had haunted her for so long? Every second counted. The truth was out, and now Alexander had to act before Elias could destroy everything they had built. The clock was ticking, and the final showdown was about to unfold. The echo of Elias's footsteps was now just a distant memory. After days of intense investigation and the final confrontation, the danger had been neutralized. Alexander had used every ounce of his power and resources to ensure that Elias Crawford was apprehended. His men had moved swiftly, securing the stalker without hesitation, ensuring that the twisted obsession that had haunted Charlotte was finally over. As Charlotte stood beside him, watching the authorities take Elias away, she felt an overwhelming weight lift from her chest. She had never realized how heavy the past had been until it was no longer there. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it faded in the face of her husband's protection. Though the scars of her past still lingered, the nightmare was now behind her. Alexander turned to her, his face calm as always, but with a warmth in his eyes that made Charlotte feel safe in a way she never had before. His presence, once a symbol of his unyielding control, now represented something deeper, his unwavering devotion to her. "You're free now," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "It's over, and I'll never let anything like this happen to you again." Charlotte looked up at him, her eyes glistening with a mix of gratitude and relief. For so long she'd been carrying the weight of secrets she hadn't shared with him, but now everything felt lighter, the burden of the past dissipating as she looked into the future with him by her side. The days following Elias's arrest were filled with quiet moments of healing. Though Charlotte had lived through her worst fears, she found comfort in the strength Alexander offered her. His constant presence, his silent support, and his fierce protection made her feel safe, something she hadn't truly felt in years. They spent their days rebuilding their lives, the remnants of fear fading with each passing hour. They traveled together, explored new places, and embraced their love fully without the shadow of the past threatening to pull them apart. The future they built was no longer tainted by the dark figure who had haunted Charlotte's life. Charlotte learned to trust again, not just Alexander but herself. The healing process wasn't easy, but with Alexander's unwavering support, she took it one step at a time. She began to rediscover the woman she had once been, the woman who was not defined by her past, but by the love she shared with the man who had been by her side through it all. "I never thought I'd be able to feel this way again," Charlotte said one evening as they sat on the balcony, watching the sunset together. "I never thought I could be free." Alexander smiled, his arm around her, holding her close. "You've always been free, Charlotte. It was just a matter of you realizing it." The love that had once been tested by darkness now flourished in the light. Charlotte and Alexander's bond grew stronger with each passing day. They faced the future with an unshakable confidence, knowing that together they could overcome anything. As they walked hand in hand into their future, they were no longer haunted by the shadows of Charlotte's past. The trust, the love, and the commitment they shared were enough to build a life that was free from fear, filled with nothing but hope and possibility. The story ends with Alexander and Charlotte looking ahead, no longer afraid, no longer bound by the ghosts of the past. Their love was the anchor that would guide them through the storms of life, and together they would create the future they had always dreamed of. A future filled with laughter, joy, and an unwavering commitment to each other. As they stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next, one thing was certain: they were stronger than ever, and nothing would ever tear them apart. The couple's journey had been long and filled with challenges, but in the end they emerged stronger, more united than ever before. As they looked toward their bright, shared future, the love they had for each other was the only thing that mattered.